Okay, all right, let's get right to it. And that is, we've been talking about, of course, all the drama, all the craziness coming out of D.C. I swear we need a chief psychiatric officer to deal with the madness that's now dealing with Donald Trump. Also, what has enveloped the Republican Party. We see what's happening down in Alabama, where an accused pedophile, Trump yesterday basically endorsed him for the United States Senate. Yes, an accused pedophile. Not only that, he admitted to first noticing his current wife when she was 15 or 16. Who the hell looks at a 15 or 16-year-old and goes, I could be dating her soon? You know what? Trump said that. My bad. He actually said that in the past as well. There's a new book out by a longtime conservative he gets right to the point in the title, How the Right Lost Its Mind. And he's using, of course, the red cap that Donald Trump has been going around, Charles Sykes. So, Charles, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Now, look, Charles, you've been on talk radio for a number of years, and look, you make it clear at the outset of this book that the role that you have played in where we stand today. Just your thoughts. So, why do you say the right has? We know the right lost their damn mind, but why are you saying the right has lost its mind?
Well, what happened in 2015 and 2016 was a soul-crushing, disillusioning slog for me, watching how the Republican Party capitulated, just rolled over for Donald Trump. And you really have to look around and go, okay, I thought I knew who you guys were. I thought I knew what you believed in. But if you're able to get on the Trump train and believe the things that you claim to believe now, then maybe I was wrong about a lot of those things.
Well, I've been highly critical, Charles, of white evangelical conservatives who for nearly 40 years have talked about morality and how the moral decay of America. And you see it right now in Alabama. They literally are saying they would rather have an accused pedophile who has been barred from actually visiting malls, where former officers have said that they were told to watch him around cheerleaders. And they say they would rather have this guy represent them in the United States Senate than a Democrat. Who prosecuted 4 Klansmen who blew up a black church in Birmingham.
Yeah, every time you think that we've hit bottom, we find out there is no bottom. And what you're seeing now with the evangelical Christians is really stunning, even having watched them line up behind Donald Trump. You know, when I wrote the book, the hardest chapter I had to write was what happened to the Christians? How do Christians look at Donald Trump and say, this is the guy that we want to put in power? But again, you know, that same group is now looking at Roy Moore and saying, okay, yes, so he sexually assaulted minors. He said that Muslims, can't serve in public office. But in our politics today, the Christianity part is always, comes second to the partisan tribal loyalty. And this is actually, I think, a defining moment for evangelical Christians. Actually in Alabama, but I think nationally as well.
You also did not back off of the reality that the right has fully embraced racism. You talk about Trump and birtherism. You talk about the alt-right as well. And this is something that, when you hear Republicans talk about, where the GOP was, what the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and who Abraham Lincoln was, the bottom line is they have embraced this, and it is a part of this party.
You know what? That's the part that's really painful for me, but there's no question about it. You mentioned birtherism. Look, Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign essentially by putting out that birther myth that the first African-American president wasn't born in this country. He did it intentionally. And the reality is other Republicans did not push back hard enough against that. And so that's a huge moral failure. Plus, the rise of the alt-right. Where did that come from? Well, look, a political party that actually took racial issues seriously would never have tolerated that, would never have embraced Donald Trump, but they did. And you see pretty much on a daily basis the way that Donald Trump is very consciously and intentionally playing a race card to solidify the support of his base. Look at his Twitters. Look who he picks fights with. This is an intentional strategy by the President of the United States to divide Americans based on race in order to give himself political advantage.
So you absolutely believe that Donald Trump, he is pushing the racial buttons. Howard Dean in 2004 said it was God, gays, and guns. You saw Trump pushing the illegal immigration buttons. And now, of course, the NFL players, LeVar Ball, you see him going after folks. But I noticed when Eminem came after him, he said nothing. Greg Popovich came after him. He said nothing. Steve Kerr said nothing. And it's interesting how he'll go after black sports figures, say nothing when white entertainers or sports figures criticize him.
Well, and remember the fight he got into with the Gold Star family after the soldier was killed in Africa, how he picked on the Democratic Congresswoman from Florida. And, look, Steve Bannon, I think, is whispering in his ear and says, look, you may not get Obamacare repeal. You may not be able to get the tax bill, but keep playing this card. This is how you keep the base revved up.
Charlie Sykes, the book is called How the Right Lost Its Mind. And trust me, I have been on this for years. Glad to see, Charles, that you wrote it and said it, being a longtime conservative. Skip, I'm telling you, I don't know where this party goes, but I keep telling people white fear is real, and this is not going to go away with the 2020 election. We better understand with the demographics changing, we're going to be dealing with these issues for a very long time, as we have been for the last 398 years for black folks. All right, folks, the question is, where does the Republican Party go from here? In his new book, Charles Sykes, it is titled How the Right Lost Its Mind. Charles, I got to ask you, you write about this. What role did you play and others play in terms of creating this tsunami, this unbelievable craziness that we see today?
Well, that's a question I ask myself, and I think a lot of people need to ask themselves that. You might remember, I live here in Wisconsin. We actually tried to erect a firewall against Donald Trump here. In fact, he lost very, very badly here. So I actually thought that we could stop this tsunami, and we didn't. And then watching people that I had, who understood who Trump was and what he represented, watching them fall into line was like watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But again, I think one of the things that people in conservative media did, though, and this is one where I really think you need to look in the mirror, is to help create this alternative reality silo. It went beyond an echo chamber. Right now, the conservative media is almost this hermetically sealed universe where they have their own facts, their own issues, their own reality, and you just cannot penetrate it. And you see how Donald Trump cynically manipulates that to protect himself against any bad information. I think a lot of us thought that it was the other side of the story, when in fact it turned out to be something that was easily hijacked by an unprincipled demagogue who happens to be the President of the United States.
So Charlie, why isn't Donald Trump inevitable? In other words, if you look at Nixon's Southern strategy, if you look at even Barry Goldwater in terms of focusing on states' rights, this is a far cry from the radical Republicans who basically led Reconstruction here. Completely different tradition. Why isn't Donald Trump inevitable?
Well, one of the things that I went back in the book was try to figure, okay, how did this actually happen? What was it, a black swan? I mean, was it a black swan event? Was it a hostile takeover where he parachuted down into an otherwise healthy party and took it over? Or was there something, deeper that we had missed and, concluded that, look, he's a symptom, not just a cause? Well, the Republican Party had gone through a lot of different stages. The Republican Party that we have right now, I think, is very different than the Republican Party of even the Bush presidencies, different than the Republican Party of Gerald Ford or of Dwight Eisenhower. So where did we go? Where did we go wrong? The Southern strategy is certainly part of it. When Newt Gingrich weaponized American partisan politics, that was part of it. The rise of the conservative media, which has now become basically they are the gatekeepers. All of those things went into it. And then, of course, what happened during the Obama presidency, where the conservative movement basically became just an outrage machine, where conservatives became very clear what they were against, who they hated, but were no longer very clear what they stood for. And I think that when you create basically this amorphous, angry, we're against you other people are to blame for all my problems, that's where you get someone like a Donald Trump.
Judith?
So yeah, I think the question for me, Charlie, is so at this point, where do you go from here? Changing demographics in America require a different kind of strategy. Yes, this right now it seems like a strategy to maintain power, to lift up white supremacy. It is now becoming the party of hate and division. So how do you come back from that?
I don't know. And this was one of the warnings that I issued before the election, which was, look, if you're a Republican and you embrace Donald Trump, you're not going to be able to come back afterwards and say to women, young people, minorities, immigrants, hey, that wasn't us. We're really an inclusive party, because it will be you. You will own all of this. And in some ways, it's become even worse than I thought it would, because every month that passes, you have the party roll over, tolerate, enable this behavior. So honestly, at this point, I don't know. And you mentioned demographically, this is a really important point here. You know, this is a president and a party that keeps appealing to its base. Okay, so you got 33%, 35% of the electorate, and they are rock solid. And yet, you know, you step back at 60% of Americans who go, this is crazy. Why are we doing all of this? And you look, what the electorate's going to look like in 10, 15 years. I think the Republicans are basically committing suicide by embracing Donald Trump.
Good morning, Mr. Sykes. And to your very, very, very important point about that, you made your bones early in media there in the broadcast market in Milwaukee with everybody from Paul Ryan to Governor Walker. So we know about voter suppression in that arena. We also know that the white supremacist culture wars are really a dodge. How do you view the importance of conservatives pushing back on the real issues underneath that kind of stuff, which is Sinclair buying all these local stations, the FCC now trying to attack net neutrality? In other words, not only what do you think about those issues, but what is the responsibility of conservatives to now say we got to stop this deep, deep, deep structural corporate elite from using the cultural wars as a cover for doing something that's really going to restrict democracy in this country?
Yeah, well, you asked a lot of things there. I think it is very important for conservatives to say, look, we got to put country ahead of party. There are lines we do not cross. Roy Moore is a line we do not cross. There are a lot of things that we should not cross. You mentioned Sinclair. I think that one of the things that Trump gets right, and bear with me here, is he understands the importance of having basically a media that is a state-run propaganda arm of his regime. And he is really pushing all of that. And I think he may well succeed in changing the media paradigm, in as short as 4 years.
Mm-hmm. As a woman of color and a Republican, I can differentiate between conservative principles and the Republican Party and the efforts that they're taking now that are quite harmful for me to even try to attract and recruit other people of color to the party. What is your advice for people such as myself? How do we move forward with this political landscape, this president in office, and where the RNC is today? You probably understand it better than I do, because what you're asking me is a task that I think is almost impossible at this point. The only thing you can do is keep your integrity and your distance. To make it clear that, okay, that is not who we are. That's not what we believe. But that becomes harder every passing day with this administration. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier, this is a president who seems absolutely committed to playing a race card and racial division in order to, solidify his base. And I don't think that that's going to stop anytime soon. I think that's going to get worse as he gets deeper into trouble. What does he do? Every time, every time he fails, every time he slips and slides, what does he do? He picks a fight. He picks one of these culture war fights. Mm-hmm. And so if he keeps doing that, your job becomes so much more difficult. And I agree with you, by the way, you separate, legitimate conservative principles from what's happening in Washington right now.
But I think it's going to be very hard for Republicans to walk back from this.
The book is called How Lost Its Mind by Charles J. Sykes. Charles, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, let's continue our conversation here. Here's the deal here. I mean, so what Sykes' writings, things that we saw and we've known, is very simple. The Republican Party played footsie with bigots, played footsie with racists, played footsie with sexists, but they thought they could contain it, control it, manage it. What I said last year on ABC This Week was, you invited evil into your party, and now it has consumed you.
Absolutely. I mean, Wisconsin is a perfect case study in that. When you listen to Charlie Sykes' local radio show, he's the one that was putting David Clark on. He supported Governor Walker and his voter suppression stuff, Paul Ryan. And you know what? I think you nailed it, Roland. They thought they could control this. But behind them are the Koch brothers and all these interests, Mercer and these cats. And now that the cat's out the bag, it's threatening to tear the country apart.
But I don't want to lump in Paul Ryan and Scott Walker with the Steve Bannons of the world and the alt-right of the world. And to Roland's point, they absolutely were all in the room, but it's hard to be able to say, okay, well, he's an okay guy, he's a horrible guy when you have everybody in the room and no one is standing out and seperating themselves.
Why would you do that?
I don't think that we have any choice now because that's what the room looks like.
It all works to the same effect.
My point I'm making is, as a Republican, that's what my room looks like. I'm in that room. Because I'm a part of the party. And so for me, I have to be able to draw the line and say, just like Charlie said, this is what we don't stand for this.
And that's how they use
we don't stand for this. But we, people like me and Charlie, we are losing the argument.
Listen to his radio show.
Let me rephrase. To that point, to that one point only, we are losing the argument and we're being ostracized. And we're now becoming Republican light. Even though we stand up for fiscal policies, if we want to put America first, but as a constitutionalist, we are still losing it because we are not echoing and supporting those statements of other people in the room.
This country is built on a history, right? A history of white supremacy. You cannot start to use race as a party and think that it's not playing into the history, right? And that it's going to get out of control. You can't put this genie back in the bottle.
I think
so. The Republican Party has a problem. They don't. How are they going to come out of it? Who's going to have the backbone to fight back against this crazy man?
Judith, you talked about this changing demographic and what's the road forward. I think with the changing demographic, it's only going to get worse because folks, culturally, they're going to be responsive and push back, and their white identity is going to be manifested in their politics, and so it's just going to get worse.
This is the problem for the party. They like power.
No question about it.
And that's what's going on here.
That's right.
A white conservative evangelical in Alabama should be saying, in no way will I even be near Roy Moore. But they're saying, nope, we want the seat.
I think both parties like power, but one party is willing to lose their moral standing to get it, and that is the Republican Party.
And that's what's driving all of this.
No question.
And that's why they have fundamental issues, and it is going to get worse. And which is I've been telling people, they keep telling me, man, why you keep saying this? When I keep saying prepare for war. 2044 is a year when no one group will be a majority in this country.
Wow.
Every year from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, white America will be freaking out because that means losing power, losing resources, losing culture. Be prepared and prepare yourself and your children because it's real.